things like that," she sobbed. "But we loved each other, and he was helping me to learn. And then he died. Oh, oh!" And she fell back in her chair, completely unconscious. Peggotty, who came in just then with the tea, realised how serious the situation was, and took my mother upstairs to bed. The doctor arrived soon afterwards, and stayed all evening to take care of his patient. At about midnight he came downstairs to the sitting-room, where Miss Betsy was waiting impatiently. "Well, doctor, what's the news? How is she?" "The young mother is quite comfortable, madam," replied the doctor politely. "But she, the baby, how is she?" cried Miss Betsy. The doctor looked strangely at Miss Betsy. "It's a boy, madam," he replied. Miss Betsy said nothing, but walked straight out of the house, and never came back. That was how I was born. My early childhood was extremely happy, as my beautiful mother and kind Peggotty took care of me. But when I was about 8, a shadow passed over my happiness. My mother often went out walking in her best clothes with a gentleman called Mr. Murdstone. He had black hair, a big black moustache, and an unpleasant smile, and seemed to be very fond of my mother. But I knew that Peggotty did not like him. A few months later, Peggotty told me that my mother was going to have a short holiday with some friends. Meanwhile, Peggotty and I would go to stay with her brother Daniel in Yarmouth, on the east coast, for 2 weeks. I was very excited when we climbed into the cart, although it was sad saying goodbye to my mother. Mr. Murdstone was at her shoulder, waving goodbye, as the driver called to his horse, and we drove out of the village. When we got down from the cart in Yarmouth after our journey, Peggotty said, "That's the house, Master David." I looked all round, but could only see an old ship on the sand. "Is that your brother's house?" I asked in delight. And when we reached it, I saw it had doors and windows and a chimney just like a real house. I could not imagine a nicer place to live. Everything was clean and tidy, and smelt of fish. Now I was introduced to the Peggotty family. There was Daniel Peggotty, a kind old sailor. Although he was not married, he had adopted 2 orphans, who lived with him and called him Uncle. Ham Peggotty was a large young man with a gentle smile, and Emily was a beautiful blue-eyed little girl. They all welcomed Peggotty and me warmly. I spent a wonderfully happy 2 weeks there, playing all day on the beach with Emily, and sleeping in my own little bed on the ship. I'm sure I was in love with little Emily in my childish way, and I cried bitterly when we had to say goodbye at the end of the holiday. But on the way home to Blunderstone, Peggotty looked at me very worriedly. "Master David, my dear," she said suddenly in a trembling voice, "I must tell you. You'll have to know now. While we've been away, your dear mother has married Mr. Murdstone. He's your stepfather now." I was deeply shocked. I could not understand how my mother could have married that man. And when we arrived home, I could not help showing my mother how very miserable I was. I went straight to my room and lay sobbing on my bed, which made my poor mother very unhappy too. As she sat beside me, holding my hand, Mr. Murdstone suddenly came in. "What's this, Clara, my love?" he asked sternly. "Remember, you must be firm with the boy. I've told you before. You're too weak with him." "Oh, yes, Edward. I'm afraid you're right," my mother replied quickly. "I'm very sorry. I'll try to be firmer with him." And when she left the room, Mr. Murdstone whispered angrily to me, "David, do you know